Ready, Marco.
Well, it's a pleasure to be with you in one more time with our deep conversations. And today with our friend, Tina Fields, that I will present to you. Tina Ashray Fields is PhD, is Professor Emerita of Ecopsychology at Naropa University in Boulder, Colorado. She serves IES on the board and as U.S.A. representative. She guides 9-day wilderness rites of passage trips, leads meditative song circles, and recently also began working as a legal psychedelic therapist. Ecopsychedelia, the deliberate use of altered states of consciousness in ecopsychological practice, is her issue for us today. Tina, please.
Thank you so much, Marco. And thank you everybody for being here. I'm so looking forward to hearing your views on this topic. So this is a conversation. I'd ask everyone to please mute who isn't speaking right now. This is a deep conversation as opposed to a webinar. And that means that I'll be giving a little intro, but then really the bulk of the time will be a discussion amongst all of us. And so I want to invite you to bring your voices forth. The structure will be like what we call council practice. That means everybody is invited to speak from the heart. You don't have to think about being super clever, just really speak what is coming up for you. And even more importantly, to listen from the heart. So if somebody says something that seems provocative, rather, if you find yourself getting riled up, listen instead for what's being said beneath the words. Listen as if you have a big ear right here on your chest, as well as next to your brain, right next to your heart. And we'll be very kind to each other and just try to engage in that way as a collective, discussing these very interesting and provocative topics. Okay? So we can have a wide range of ideas brought forth today. Again, the topic, as Marco said, is ecopsychedelics, the deliberate use of altered states of consciousness in ecopsychological practice. What is an altered state of consciousness? What is the normal baseline state of consciousness? This implies that there is such a thing as an ordinary state of consciousness. Well, what on earth is that? Normally, in the industrial growth society, it's the cognitive that's privileged, right? Oh, I'm getting ready, I'm getting dressed, I'm being a functional adult, I'm eating breakfast, I'm driving to work. These are the ways that we think, okay, that's normal. And yet, when we drive to work, how often do you have a moment where you're suddenly somewhere and you don't remember how you got there? You don't remember the stages because you drive this way every single day and you went on autopilot and your mind went somewhere else. That's an altered state of consciousness. Your body is in control, it's fine. You'll wake up enough when something happens, hopefully. But we're not completely aware all the time in that way that is considered the dominant regular state of consciousness, right? And then there's also something like dreams. Are dreams anomalous? I mean, they happen all the time, right? And yet, if you're coming from a dream state when trying to make decisions in a collective, it's looked askance. If you're using your intuition, it's looked at askance in the Western industrial growth society, sometimes. And so we see that the idea of the ordinary state of consciousness is actually quite narrow, a little too narrow. A lot of hard scientific understanding actually arose out of dreams. For example, Kekule's discovery of the structure of benzene, which opened up aromatic chemistry. He dreamed of the Ouroboros, the snake biting its own tail when pondering the problem. And that woke up his idea of how it could be, leading to this form of organic chemistry, aromatic chemistry, sorry. And Loewi's proof that our nerves transmit signals chemically, that came from dreams. Alfred Russel Wallace's theory of evolution by natural selection came when he had tropical illness and he entered kind of hallucinatory fever dreams. And he woke up understanding how this worked, which was paralleled with Darwin's views. It woke up at the same time in both of them, and his was through fever dreams. Mendeleev's periodic table of elements that's taught in every high school was solidified by dreams. In fact, it's still arising. And the final one I'll give you is Descartes' scientific method, the very foundation of the way that Western civilization has thought of as ordinary reality came originally from a dream. So what is ordinary consciousness? What is an altered state? Ecopsychology at its core, I would posit, is a project of deconstructing some of the consensus trances of the industrial growth society. The idea that humans are better than all other beings, for example, that we can control everything, that we should control everything, that progress is good, that matter is basically dead, right? All of these stories that we are told, these are things that we are in progress of deconstructing in order to survive as a species, and for many other species to survive, so we can knock off our bad behaviors. And we, honestly, its roots are in accessing other states of consciousness for wisdom and healing. Dr. Leslie Gray, who is both a clinical psychologist and a Native American traditionally trained healer, she posits that shamanism is the oldest method of healing known to humanity, cross-culturally, all over the place. And what that is the core is going to nature for wisdom, understanding how to speak with the other beings or to listen to the other beings for knowledge, for wisdom, for healing, for recalibrating our right relationships, and so our people can thrive. At the core, our field is rooted in what we would now call altered states of consciousness, the ability to access those. And I bet that every one of you today who is doing nature connection exercises deliberately uses these kinds of states of consciousness to evoke, you're evoking particular consciousness states in your people or yourself, a transpersonal experience. For example, if I take somebody for a walk, I'll start out by having them breathe in a calm way, breathing together, and then using the different senses to become more aware of the place, right? Oh, don't just use your eyes now. Let's listen. What do you hear? How do you experience this place primarily through hearing? What kind of information are you gaining? Close your eyes. What do you smell? Right? What do you feel? You touch. We move into different ways of knowing by using the different senses. Very simple. We might use meditative states to create. They've just arrived, right? It's I'm in my life, but we create a calm state. Put your hands on the ground. Let's breathe together. We create peace and equanimity on purpose. We work on regulating the nervous systems through deliberate practices, and then hopefully that carries on. We often will try to access a unitive consciousness with nature. A goal of many spiritual and religious traditions to become vaster than ourselves, right? We get rid of the small, isolated, autonomous, human, skin-bordered self idea and instead realize more of our interconnectedness with all of life. That when I breathe in, I'm breathing in air that you have just breathed out somewhere. We're breathing in air that was in the lungs of the dinosaurs long ago. It's the same air. And so we realize our interconnectedness just through these simple exercises. A widening self of identity. We realize through our practices, we realize the family nature of all beings, how we're interdependent on each other, how we have similar hands to raccoons, how we eat the food that becomes us, and we breathe the air that the trees have breathed out, and we breathe out and the trees breathe in, and just all of that is a different way of realizing our place in the world and the nature of ourselves. So those are a few. And then when we go deeper with leading, for example, wilderness rites of passage ceremony, like I imagine several of you lead, like I lead, I take people out for 9 days, and there's a lot of preparation ahead of time for months. And we have, this is classic rites of passage, we have 3 days of preparation together in a base camp, and then they go out for 3 days of a fasting solo in the middle. And in our area, that includes bears, mountain lions, elk, very large animals, whom they may see. And there's a way to prepare people so that this feels like a blessing rather than something to fear. And then they're able to meet their own deepest, wildest selves, as well as meet the wild world, and then come back in a good way. And then we have 3 days of holding them. So all of this is a really deep ceremony is what it comes down to. If we didn't prepare them in this way, if we just said, okay, have a good time. The first time somebody saw a bear in their life, they'd likely freak out and run, which is the worst thing you can do. But in this case, they don't. They stay put. They're in awe. They know. They recognize the bear nature in themselves or what the bear is bringing them. And nobody has ever been hurt. Inshallah, it continues. But it's because of the use of deliberately induced different states of consciousness that they're able to endure these things, that they go out and are not, often they don't even feel hungry because of the ceremonies that we've done, even though they're not eating for 3 days. So some might say, and it's always with permission, by the way. There's always consensus given beforehand. Everybody agrees that this is what we're doing. That's another thing to think about. So here are some questions that I have. Now, psychedelics are becoming legalized, at least in my country. And this means psychedelic plant medicines, which have been used for millennia, of course. But now, because it is legalized, it's becoming commodified. They are becoming commodified. I don't even want to use the word it, they, these beings. And as that happens, there's less respect for these plants being shown. They're going to be farmed in a bad way. They're going to be treated with pesticides and fertilizers and done as big agriculture. And people are using them rather than coming into deep relationship with them in the old ways. And so I have great concern about that. I think that ecopsychology is uniquely poised to help bring awareness to the necessity of having a reciprocal relationship, a reciprocally beneficial relationship with all of these beings as beings. To keep bringing attention back to that seems quite vital. And if we don't do it, I imagine these plants are going to bite us in the hiney, just like tobacco does. You know, we disrespected the teacher plant tobacco, and now it causes cancer. I don't want to see that happen, and I think we can help. Also, the last element of that is that the indigenous peoples who first were working with these plants are also not benefiting from the great money that's now going to be rolling in. And how can we help them thrive because of their knowledge and gifts and have them not lose what they've gotten? So there it is. Here are my ideas of what we could discuss. The role of spontaneous altered states of consciousness in the formation of ecological identity. Like I've had weird mystical experiences, like hearing a tree talk that woke me up when I was a child. It woke me up. Before that, it was like, yeah, we're outside. I was bored. I wanted to read. But when something like that happens, boom, it's like, whoa, there is more going on in this world. It's very interesting out here. I should pay attention. Maybe those kinds of things happen. And how can we help those happen more for people in a good way? And how can we hold them as ecopsychologists so that that becomes the default reality for that person rather than just an anomalous blip in their lives that they then push aside and then get on with the business of being a good cog in business as usual, which doesn't help. What about, that's a wake-up gift from nature. If you have stories, I want to hear them. What about the role of deliberately constructed altered states of consciousness in facilitating ecopsychology? Again, that was the sensory awareness expansion practices that are common in forest bathing walks or ritual ceremonial structures for work like longer work like retreats or rites of passage work. And of those, what have you noticed? If you've done this stuff, what elements work and which ones not so much, and why? What are the pitfalls we all should avoid? What have you noticed? And then finally, the role of plant medicines in ecopsychology. I don't let anybody bring plant medicines on my rites of passage trip, for example. That ceremony of being out in the woods alone is strong enough. They don't need more. And as a guide, I don't want to have to deal with it. And yet some people would want to do that, especially if they go out solo. So how does that work? What are the role of plant medicines in all kinds of ecopsychological practice? And finally, the one I brought up, as drug legalization's role forth, what can be the role of ecopsych to benefit both the plants and the people? So I'll stick these, and we're not limited to that, by the way. Those are just my initial ideas. I'm going to place that in the chat and know that we're not limited to those ideas either. If you have other aspects you'd like to bring up or stories you'd like to tell, they are very welcome. So now I'll be quiet. And the way we'll work this is, if you would like to speak, put your name in the chat and I'll call on you one by one. And if you can refer to each other, that's nice. And again, remember to speak from the heart. You don't have to be clever. You don't have to be perfect. This is a conversation. And whatever you want to say, let's say it. Let's say it out loud. Just put your name in the chat rather than what you want to say, because I don't want everybody to read the chat. I want us to listen to each other. Okay, is that clear? Are there any questions about process before we begin?
Leah writes something.
I know, Leah, I'm going to call on you first, Leah, to speak, because again, I'd rather have us listen to each other. And so everybody stay muted until the one who speaks, and I'll call on you one by one. If you want to speak, just put your name in a queue, just your name in the chat, and let's have some fun. Thank you so much. I look forward to learning from you. Leah.
First, thank you, Tina. That was so well brought out and said, and I just love listening to you and to the words you chose, and I can feel how connected you are to this and passionate and caring you are about this. So thank you. And I want to say that I deeply feel that working with nature is our medicine. And I have witnessed hundreds and hundreds of experiences that cannot be explained through the national mind or any rational thinking that happen out there. And I remember my first night out in the dark with Animas Valley. And I got so scared my first night out in the dark that I came back to camp. And the next morning I went to thank the place, and there was a small doll, Corvurus, the three-headed dog, just waiting there in the grass, in the middle of the wilderness, in the middle of nowhere. Nobody could ever explain or understand, but it was there for me. So that's just a little example. There are so many more, but of how did this happen and how is this connected? And yes, I do feel that, especially I can talk about myself, that I do intentionally help people expand their consciousness. I think that's one of the main invitations for people to feel oneness and interconnected to the greater world that we do. How can we make sure that this is for their better good is a really, really good question to ask. So I also would like to hear others on that.
Thank you, Leah. Marcella, you have something in the chat. Please speak it.
I just translated in Italian, Tina.
Oh, great. Thank you so much. Leah that was a wonderful ending question. How do we make sure it benefits people? So let's hold that one in mind too. Who's next? Ideas, thoughts, stories, questions? Mar, thank you.
Hello, thank you so much, Tina. I've been thinking a lot about psychedelics and like the practice with psychedelics and also their kind of, sometimes I find like a lot of people are seeing that as a very fast road of like maybe some contemplative practices or even eco-psychology will guide you there in a slow, very mindful way. And there is this danger, I find, like with the psychedelics in this society, just seeing it as another thing that we can do fast, like a magic pill that like, and I really feel that maybe there is a bit more conversation into, okay, this is not a magic pill. It takes a long time also to integrate those teachings, and maybe that's also how eco-psychology might help into kind of integrate the teaching of the plants in a very slow, mindful way with the help of nature. And how do we do that so it doesn't become just like this other pill that we take? As you said, it's really scary how to see like now it's just being kind of commercialized, and how is that going to affect to indigenous communities? And I don't have a solution, but I do share the worry as you've mentioned. Thank you.
Thank you, Mar. It occurs to me to ask where you folks are calling in from. Leah, I think you're in Israel, right? And Mar, where are you calling from?
So I'm visiting a friend in Berlin, but I normally live in London, and I'm from Spain.
Great.
Yeah.
So interesting to hear these different perspectives. And thank you for your really important point about eco-psychology can perhaps then intervene after a person has had an extremely strong experience, because integration is super important. And that could be a leverage point where we then can create the deeper relationship and the greater integration of the gifts for the person, both. Yeah, thank you. Effie, am I saying it right?
Effie, yes.
Thank you,
Tina.
Yes,
Hi, everybody.
Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Greece, Athens. I'm Greek. Okay. I'm not sure how you make the choices of. I know I've never tried psychedelics myself. I think it was kind of natural in me. I didn't want to use more. Anyway, that's a joke. But I know that there are some restrictions considering the use of them. Like there are some people who are very fragile, like structure-wise, or they have some pathologies that cannot afford such expanded experiences. So in some practices that we use altered states of consciousness, like the induction in a music therapy session, for instance, we try not to implement that on people who are psychotic or have this psychotic structure. As I don't know how you do about that. It's a question. Actually, I just wanted to know.
So your question is, how do practitioners discern with whom to work with and who to not work with? I can answer that. Is there anybody else who would like to answer that first? Okay, in the outfit that I've begun working with, which is called Medicinal Mindfulness, here in Boulder, Colorado, because they've just legalized things. There is a very heavy intake form, pages and pages and pages and pages. And if the person presents with that kind of thing, they either will not work with them, or they will use only cannabis, for example, and there will be a psychotherapist and a medical doctor connected with the practice. And there's a lot of integration always afterwards. That's part of the package journey.
Okay, okay, thank you. So there is a doctor also
There
there.
is,
Yeah,
yeah.
medical.
Yes, and certain people, if you're presenting with psychotic symptoms, as you said, then they just won't work with them in that way. They'll suggest, well, maybe you need to do your psychotherapy first for X amount of time, and then we'll talk about it again, that sort of thing. But you're bringing this up makes me think, okay, when we're taking people out to nature, we don't have intake forms like that usually. And so have you ever had, any of you ever had somebody who had something going on inside that made it very difficult when they then did the nature connection exercises? Or did the nature connection exercises by nature help stabilize some of that? Just asking.
Can I say, I don't work like that. I don't have the experience of guiding people in nature or something like this, besides people I love or my friends, just like that. But I've seen people living in wild places, like more secluded places, small islands, for instance. And I remember that I had been there as a doctor for 2 years in a very small island of almost 100 people, something like that, 200 people, sorry, a very small one in Aegean Sea. And every year, at least one of the teachers that were coming there for 1 year, they had a psychotic episode. And I don't know, yes, it is true. I've been handling actually 2 of them myself. I've been treating them. So I don't know. For me, the experience of being there in this very small secluded island was like paradise. It made me feel so like healthy and sane. I'm not sure whether it was the wild place or the need to be connected with people whom they couldn't understand at all. I don't know if it was like from nature or from the social surrounding, this misunderstanding of foreign people coming in a very small place where the residents there were kind of more reserved maybe, or absolutely different, but it has happened.
Can you do again your question, Tina? Because Marco just entered again, and I think he has to tell something about your question.
Sure, I'll put them in the chat again, just basic areas of
Marco, ela nos perguntou se tiveram experiência, se alguém teve experiência psicótica em uma experiência de natureza.
Yes, I have this in one occasion, a person, a woman that was with us in a immersion in nature. So the process was so strong, and she was using Ritalin. I don't know if is this the right word. Is a kind of medicine to deficit disorder, and she discontinued the use of this medicine and had an episode of psychotic that we need to have a psychiatric intervention. But the fact is that really a deep experience of nature, put our consciousness in a lower level, and it's possible that some contents and conflicts appear, no? So even without any kind of power plant, plant of knowledge of spiritual plants, it's really a risk, really a risk. So we have psychiatric and medical appreciation or valuation of the history of any people that came to work with ecopsychology and very deep experiences. It's really necessary, no? Yeah, it's my experience.
Thank you, Michael. I just want to say something on that, so that I don't sound very like terrified and frightening doctor. It's like psychosis is not so common. I'm not actually talking about like schizophrenia or something like that. Mostly about people who are more fragile than others, and probably this can happen in any practice. Okay, in any practice of even therapy, it can be. There are restrictions in all sorts of psychotherapists. Forgive me for this medical thing, just is my way. Okay.
As my connection with the web fall, I don't know if you talk about the psychiatric emergency as Groff speak about, because in my perspective, this woman that had experienced, in fact, had a spiritual immersion.
Spiritual
Because
emergency.
the consequences of her episode was positive at the end. No? Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing this up. These are more anomalous than usual that somebody comes this way. And the question that arises in my mind when thinking about them, I've experienced them too among groups, but it's very rare, is how do we prevent, how do we help hold that person so it's unlikely that they will have to go there in that, you know? And one of the things that has worked for us is to first take the time to create a deep container of trust among the group.
Yeah.
So that person has the more than human world, and they also have the guide, but then they also know, oh, it's all right for whatever is happening. I don't have to be ashamed. I don't have to slam it down. I don't have to go into reaction inside, which can make it even worse. So just creating that community feel and making sure people know it's good to look out for each other. That can go a ways. Another thing that that I like to do is, this might sound really woo, but we're talking about anomalous experiences here, is we have noticed that energies, what we're doing is we're creating different kinds of energies. And when you work with that kind of thing, other energies can be drawn to it. And so we kind of do some magical protection, just basically setting an intention that only beneficial beings are welcome in here. And anybody who intends us harm or mischief has to stay outside. And it's very simple. And yet I've noticed effects, like bad dreams stop when we do things like that. And maybe they were there before. Or people get hurt less, if not at all.
Can I comment?
Please do.
No, you are absolutely right. Yes, really is necessary to have this trust atmosphere, and we bring this with frequent circles of sharing all the time our experiences, and working with body, the body consciousness, body awareness, you know. But this spiritual issue in ecopsychological works, I don't know. It's a very important point to me in this moment, because we had some experiences in this areas, and well, really necessary to ask for protection. It produce a strong effect in the group, and create a kind of safety, psychological atmosphere, you know, in which we feel that we are connected with something very special and subtle and really spiritual. And it is another point that is to bring the spiritual issue to ecopsychological practice. No, it's an important point to discuss. And so it's really, really, yeah, it's important.
Thank you, Marco. I totally agree. For us, one of the things we do when we first arrive is to ask the land's permission to be there and help us do this work and to protect our people. Because as you say, we are working in many realms. We're working in the physical realm, we're working in the cognitive realm, we're working in the spiritual realm too. And so, and we are working in an animistic way too. So to get that feeling and then maybe make gifts to the land. And then also with our people there, I tend to ask their ancestors to be there with them to help them. And whether or not this happens or not, I mean, I think it happens, but that's a belief structure. And so whether or not, at least it has them thinking about that, about how they have come from a long line of people who have their back, who would like to see them thrive, whether they like them or not, they still want to see them thrive. And so it hooks them into something much deeper than just this little moment of their lives, whatever is impacting them. I'm sure there are more ways to do that too. All right, Dimitris is next. Thank you.
Yes, hello, Tina. I'd like to ask you, I never had an experience with psychedelic substances, but I'd like to know what's the relation of our subject with some spiritual experiences, like out-of-body experience that I had in a spiritual group that were intentional, or some other, if you know the term, near-death experience. What's, if any, relation between this spiritual and the subject that we are talking now? Thank you.
Do you want me to answer that, or would somebody else like to start answering that? Because I've spoken a lot. I'm happy to address it, but I'd like to also open it to others. Okay, I would just say at the core, Dimitris and all, this is from my perspective. Again, more perspectives are very welcome here. At the core, ecopsychology is a transpersonal practice. It came out of transpersonal psychology, which means beyond the personal, or more of a Jungian view that there's more, as Shakespeare said, more in heaven and earth, Horatio, than are dreamt of in our philosophy. That we're more than just our little aggregated personalities. There's magic afoot in the world. And ecopsychology is about that particular kind of magic that is very grounded, relational, has a lot of help. All of our relatives and other sorts of bodies. And it's interesting that, just thinking about it, the way that ecotherapy is going, it seems more on a superficial level, like let's go out and breathe near trees because it's good for us physically. And yet there's all this magic that can occur, right? And when you open up in one way, I've noticed in my life, is this true for you too, Dimitris? When I open up in one way, like paying attention to dreams, for example, then I tend to open up in other ways too, and more possibility enters for me. Is that true for you? And I know Mar wants to speak again, but I want to give Dimitris a chance to answer or deepen this first, if you want to say anything.
No, I like to ask, to listen your views. Thank you.
When it's in the wide realm of transpersonal experiences. And Ecopsych doesn't talk about it enough, perhaps. Mar, your turn.
Yes, thank you. Very happy to wait until this conversation it's over. But I had a bit of a different question. So because you've mentioned before how with ecopsychology practices we can enter this like altered state of consciousness that psychedelics are known for, and we can work with psychedelics to enter those as well. So I was wondering, it's a bit of a personal question to you, and like what made you choose to work with psychedelics and ecopsychology? Like, why adding that into the practice?
Honestly, for me, it was just serendipitous walking. My colleague was super into psychedelics, and I'm personally not, but he wanted to bring it into what we were doing. And so we started just listening to a person who was a graduate of our university who opened one of the first psychedelic clinics here 10 years ago, working with cannabis only. And so I thought, well, let's try to understand what they're doing and how it works. And then so I went to a couple things they were doing because I was invited, and I thought I better understand it if he wants to be bringing it in. And then I found I liked the method, which is not eco-psychological. It's it's beautiful, but it's more like a personal rave, honestly, where you go into a room and you listen to music, and they do open it with ceremony, and then you thank the plant and imbibe the plant, and you have an intention just like you would in wilderness rites of passage, and then you're held by guides. So I liked that model very much. Actually, what really led me to it was the realization that a lot of younger people will approach psilocybe mushrooms, for example, as, dude, let's get high. And yet the first time I was allowed to engage with psychedelic mushrooms, I was in my 20s, and I was held by an older woman who took me out to the forest, and I had profound awareness of, I asked the question, what is a sacred site? Why is one sacred and one not sacred? I was very cranky about that, honestly. I thought that's just, and yet the mushrooms took my legs, and I fell down, and I laid next to a tree. I can't believe I'm telling you this on tape. But anyway, I laid down next to a tree, and there were ants running around all over the place. I couldn't work my legs. And then I thought, oh, of course, mushrooms don't know legs. I have to work the legs, but I'll let them work my eyes. I negotiated for a while. There was another mind in there. I liked that. It was just like the shamanic work I'd been doing for years, but there was another mind in there. That was fun. Anyway, I let myself lay down by the tree, and ants were running around all over the place. And I suddenly had this insight about the question I'd brought. So intention, the role of intention was important. The question was about sacred sites and the ants on me. And suddenly I thought, oh, there's a parallel here. I'm aware of the ants when they're running on my bare skin, for example. And I thought, I bet sacred sites, no, it wasn't I bet, they showed me that sacred sites, it's all sacred, it's all one being, just like my body is all me. But if I, as a tiny person on the planet, wanted to catch the attention of something larger, it's better to go near the ear to talk than the elbow. That's all. That was the insight I got. And so I see that there is incredible potential for these teacher plants to help us gain these insights that I don't know, I don't think I would have gotten that otherwise. With my mind, I wouldn't have gotten there. I was not getting there. And that changed me forever. I mean, I was 20, that's a long time ago. I never forgot it. 24, I was 24. So things like that, but it has to be used, I don't even like that word. We have to engage with them intentionally, reciprocally. And how can we in eco-psychology help that happen? That's the main question that I'm presenting with. Does that make sense?
Yes, I think if I can just reflect on that, on the last question, thank you for the story, I think eco-psychology would be great for the very important integration process that needs to happen after. Preparation and integration could be just perfect for eco-psychology.
Yes, how would you do it?
How would I do it?
Yes, yes. And then
sorry, I didn't catch the last.
and then everybody listening, please think about that question. How might you bring eco-psychology to help in that way? I love this, Mar, it's perfect.
I think eco-psychology does bring you very, very close to like that connection within yourself and nature, and thus create that space for self-inquiry, a self-reflection, and the time and the slowness and that needs to, I think, happen in the integration part of a psychedelic experience. And I just think like if you have a psychedelic experience like that in a ceremony, and then you go back to the city and you go into the pub and with your friends, and then that learning and that teaching of the plant, just as fast as it came, it like equally fast will like go away. My on my opinion. So yeah, I think doing eco-psychology after would be a beautiful way to help. Thank you.
Thank you. I could not agree more. Eco-psychology, nature connection practices help after any profound experience, for sure, help you stay on keel after long nature immersion journeys, even going back to a tree in your city.
And being helped by nature also helps.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. So
yes,
yeah, go ahead,
I
Marcella.
would enter right here. I think that one of the main aims of eco-psychology, it's what we call widening. I mean, get prepared to have a widened vision of the world that goes much far beyond what we believe that's real. And I think that, well, Maslow describes the peak experience like going with an helicopter on the top of the mountain. So you have such a vision that you want to go back to this top of the mountain because an helicopter can't stay along so high. And so this experience in helicopter gives you the will to go and backpack and ride shoes and learn how to go high in the mountain slowly. So I see psychedelics, if someone wants to use them, in this with this objective, like what Don Juan did with Castaneda, that gave him the peyote, and then in the second book he said, well, you were so close that I needed to give you something strong, but now you have to look for your own way to discover how to build this capacity, this ability to reach this wider sense of consciousness. And in the Italian school, we used the term green mindfulness. And actually, we gave the name of the conference of our next international conference, Ecopsychology and Green Mindfulness, because while mindfulness is mostly being aware of our inner world, green mindfulness is being aware of our inner world, being at the same time aware of our outer world, and thanks to the outer world. And then the more I go deeper, the more I can get in touch outside. So I see our way of working a very gentle, slow, and secure way. I don't see psychedelics as part of a practice of ecopsychology, but can be some occasional, for me, some occasional experience in order to widen and to give the will to go and search, how can I reach once again this kind of awareness by myself? Because we can do it. As humans, we can do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Marcella. Gentle, slow, and secure way of basically building capacity so that these things, this widened sense of self, becomes the default reality. I think that, yes, I agree. You know, Mark Coleman actually brings traditional mindfulness practice outdoors. And so you're doing mindfulness meditation, which is usually, as you say, focused on the inner, but he brings it outdoors so that you, at least when I did it with him, it was like it was the combo. You're very aware of what's there and you're very aware of what's here. And that combo, I don't know, can really seat a person in the world, in their power, up, down, sideways. There's something profound about bringing nature into any of these practices, or bringing mindfulness practices of any sort into.
What's his name
nature.
again?
Oh, I'll write it in. Mark Coleman. He calls it Awake in the Wild. So we've only got another 5 minutes. Is there anything that anybody would like to, anybody who hasn't spoken, you're invited to speak again. This is a perfection-free zone. Ideas are welcome, stories are welcome. Elias, how do I say it?
Both is right. You can say Elias or Elias. Yeah. I was just wondering while listening, and I think it's hard to answer, is maybe more, yeah, a bit rhetorical. I mean, I was wondering because also on the psychedelic research, and there's a lot talking about this set and setting, like how do you make the safe space to go into these profound experiences? And I was wondering if you personally, I guess so, but I mean, is there something we can count on to say, okay, maybe for the more sensible individuals, like the question we had before, is it something that like going to nature is a bit more of supportive way for this set and setting, like preparing the people to be more prepared for a profound experience? Because I have just noticed that a lot of people, when they do like therapeutic psychedelics, they talk about going to nature and stuff. Is like a pattern, I don't know. And I was wondering, is it kind of the direction that we were speaking before with Mar, that about how do you prepare yourself, or how do you integrate the experience? Or, you know.
You know, I would suggest taking themselves on what was sometimes called a medicine walk before a big journey. And that means taking a day with the things that you need, clothing appropriate for the weather. You could fast if you wanted to, but be sure to take water and tell somebody where you're going. And you just practice aimless wandering. This is a classical eco-psychological practice. Aimless wandering, where you let yourself be drawn to whatever you're drawn to, and you have a question in mind. And the question might be the question that you're bringing to your later psychedelic work. And then you see what the more than human world presents and what that means to you. You know, it's all very subjective, very personal. And then you bring it back and talk to your person. That's one way. I would also say that, honestly, for some people, nature is scary. So when you're talking set and setting in the context you brought it up, that means making it really safe. So you better talk to the person ahead of time, and you know what I mean? it's for some of Mark Coleman's meditators, they were uncomfortable doing it outside. It was just too much stimulus. Whereas for me, it was so much easier. So it really depends on who you are. Does that make sense?
Yeah, exactly. I think it's a personal thing, and yeah, it's good to know. Thank you.
You can make it safe. You could just take their hand and take them outside and do one of those snapshot exercises where you open your eye, where you take them blindfolded and show them something you're drawn to for them, like a flower, and say, open your eyes and look into the mirror. And they open their eyes, and then you talk about, what do you see in yourself? What about yourself is reflected in this flower? That's really safe. I mean, that might be safer for some folks for whom this is all very new. Exercises like that. And I wish we had more time. I want to hear what ones you would do. But Lamfrini, you have raised your hand, and I think you might be the last one. You're muted.
Hi, yeah. Hi, I just wanted to say hello. I'm from The Hague, I'm calling at the moment, but I will commute The Hague and Thessaloniki in Greece. So I don't know much about ecopsychology. So actually, I was also expecting, when it started all this, to hear a little bit what's going to the program and all that. But the question about the psychedelics, I mean, my experience, because I did here, at least I can see a lot of people having that they're not in supervised ways. In Holland, what I have experienced, but the microdosing is very, very broad. So either using and some people do have a good experience with the microdosing. It happens that I know some very good friend of mine who's using it, and she has suffered quite a long time. I mean, I can't, I'm not against things that people come through different ways to find that they're helping them. So at this moment, my position is that I'm just I'm observing the situation without much of the judgment, but looking how this will develop and why is and what will be the result of it, because it seems at the moment like a hype. And so everybody wants, it's something new, and it's a trendy thing to do. Also for psychotherapists. This is what I could see up to now, and have no real position or opinion about this.
Thank you. Well, as it develops, it'll be interesting to hear your perspectives on it, especially as you develop through your ecopsychology school journey.
Mm-hmm.
Tina,
Marco,
can I say a quick words?
Let me check in with Flor. Is that okay? Because we're at time. Is that okay?
We are without time.
Okay, Tina, it's okay.
Okay, Marco, you are last, and then I'll say a closing.
You are welcome.
Totally worth it.
Yeah, well, I think that the experience of deep connection with nature is the core of the practice of ecopsychology. Complemented by deconstructions of views on life supported by the dominant society and frankly dysfunctional, and that disconnect us from the web of life. I have done my entire path in ecopsychology without using any power plant. But I am a witness that experiences with ayahuasca here in Brazil, for example, can have impressive effects in terms of discovering the interconnection between all things. But today, for example, it's possible to buy ayahuasca over the internet without any connection with the original cultural background in which ayahuasca appears. This will be a long discussion for us. And I think that is, Tina, our first moment to discuss this topic that is really important. And I remember Ralph Metzner, one of the pioneers of the greening of psychology. He studied many plants always within their cultural contexts. Any future consideration on how to integrate this topic into eco-psychology must be accompanied by an appreciation of the worldview associated with these plants, as you said, Tina. There is an undeniable advance in scientific research for the use of these plants as resources for psychiatric treatments. And it is likely that the discovery of the brain changes they cause will give this type of medicine a central role. I believe that the connective experience will always be the center. And for it, there is a whole phenomenology about what generates it, and that is one of our central points. But I am sensitive to the argument that there is such a profound disconnection today that the controlled use of these power plants may become perhaps an important instrument for the great turning point that Capra and Macy talked about. Yeah, it's that.
Thank you, Marco. I'm glad we extended a few minutes to hear these wise words.
Yes.
Ralph Metzner was one of
Before
my.
closing,
Well, I'm not done yet. Hold on just a sec. Oh, I just wanted to say that Ralph Metzner was one of my own teachers, and I respect what he said and what you're saying very much, and want to echo that that the question at the core seems to me to be, what does right relationship look like with these plants, with the earth, with ourselves? And I would encourage folks who are interested in exploring teacher plants to find ones that grow where you live. Explore the traditions of the place where you live, rather than importing vines from another country that, yeah, who knows how they were grown. They're out of cultural context, as you said. I also want to say, this is interesting that this talk leaned so much toward the psychedelic side, when to me that was one little fraction of of the question. The question is, how do we work with altered states and facilitating eco-psychology, which honestly dominantly is just doing exercises that shift a person's consciousness, and then how do we support that shift to become the norm over the long haul, so that they feel their interconnectedness, so they feel their belonging, their deep belonging, and the rightness of their existence, so they can go forth and be part of the solution, right? And so plants are part of it, but not all of it. And I look forward to more conversations, I hope, along those lines. Deeply appreciate all that was brought here. Thank you, Marcella. Please.
thank you, Tina. Thank you so much for this beginning of talking about this topic, because I think we will go further. Well, Flor just reminded me to talk about to remind that we're going to have our 9th international conference from the 20th to the 24th September in Sardinia. That's in the heart of the Mediterranean. I put the link on the chat, or you can find it on www.ies.bio. And it's going to be a very, very peculiar setting. We are going to be on the riverside of the sea, within a pine forest of 700 acres. So don't miss it. That's it.
Again, thank you all for coming and joining. For those of you who spoke, thank you for sharing your insights, your thoughts, your wisdom. Those of you who didn't speak, I hope to hear you speak at some point. I'm very curious about what you think. Shout out to my student, Ashley. Hi, Ashley. I'm glad you're here. And the next deep conversation will be on the March 20th with the Peru Charter.
Yes, everybody's welcome. Thank you, Tina.
Thank you. Thank you, Tina.
Hope this was useful. Thank you all for being here, and I hope you walk forward in your days in great beauty and joy.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you, Marco.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you
so much.
Thank you, Tina. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, everybody.
Oh, for now.